I was 7 years old when this story happened. Like any little girl, I felt happy when my father came and told us that we would spend the holiday in a new place that we had not visited before. In Colorado, where the mountains, rivers, and waterfalls are. He said we were going to stay in his friend's cabin, which my father had rented from him for 2 months. The cabin was in a very quiet location, away from all major roads. Also, it was near the river and there was a waterfall. It was special for all of us because we loved living in nature. I can't forget what I felt when we got there and saw the cabin. I felt uneasy, as if we weren't alone or if someone was watching us from inside the house. When we opened the cabin door, the first thing I looked at was the fireplace, but that wasn't what caught my attention. It's the picture that was on the wall above it. It was a picture of a woman in her 30s. The picture was very normal, but for me, there was something in it that made me uncomfortable. The cabin was a little cramped. The lower floor only had the entrance, the kitchen, and one bedroom. We go upstairs to see the upper floor. There was a room with a bunk bed for me and my sister to sleep in. But the ladder that was between the two beds was so heavy that my mother could not move it. But that reassured her that he would not fall and harm me or my sister. Also on the top floor was a bathroom. As soon as I entered it, I saw the shower curtain moving. I told my mom about it, but she told me maybe it was because of some air coming through the window. But the window was completely closed. The last thing was the balcony. It was very narrow and full of boxes. The sun is gone. We spent our first night in this cabin. I was playing with my sister until our bedtime. When I was in bed, I don't know why I felt the same way I did when I saw the cabin for the first time. A feeling of anxiety and uneasiness. I got out of bed and went downstairs to sleep with Mom and Dad in their room. When I entered this room, I felt relaxed, unlike the rest of the cabin rooms. My mother was flipping through an album she had found in the drawer by chance. It had a lot of pictures of where we were, but also, a few years ago, pictures of the cabin while it was being built and the workers around it. And there was also a picture of a man and a woman outside the cabin. Concern appeared on my mother's face. I don't know why, but when I asked her, she said there was nothing. I managed to sleep that night next to my mother, and when morning came, we went into the kitchen to make breakfast, but we found something strange. All the kitchen drawers were open, and there was broken glass on the floor. I still remember my feelings at that time and the fear that my mother hadn't tried to hide. I also remember the sound of the wind hitting the window from outside. There was only one question in my mind: what happened last night? We did nothing. We just swept up the glass and threw it in the trash, and we decided to forget about it. At night, my mother and I were getting ready for bed, but my father came and said that it was still early, and we had better go for a walk by the river. We actually went out and went to the river. The weather was fine, not as cold as the day before. I approached the river and looked at the water, but the strange thing is that I did not see my reflection. But I saw the reflection of the lady whose picture was hanging inside the cabin. My mother also came close to the river. She also felt a strong push. My mother struggled not to fall into the river and be swept away by the current, but finally she fell to the ground. She got up and brushed her clothes off, then turned around furiously to tell my dad to stop joking. But she was surprised that my father did not stand behind her, but rather stood at a great distance and played with me and my sister. My sister and Dad are back in the cabin, but I just stood there looking at my mother, seeing on her face the same worry I had seen in the morning when we entered the kitchen. The second night passed, and we woke up in the morning to a strange event as well. There were footprints starting in the kitchen and ending at the fireplace. How did that happen? We were all asleep, and none of us walked into the cabin at night. At noon, my sister spoke to me and said she was upset because I was going to sleep in my parents' room, leaving her to sleep in the room alone. She asked me to go back to sleep in our room. I strongly refused, but in order for her to be satisfied, I told her that I would come to the room to play together every day before bedtime and then go back to sleep in my parents' room. We were playing inside the ladder of the bunk bed. My sister was going up it, and I was standing there. This is when the heavy ladder moved, and my sister started screaming at the top of her lungs. My sister fell to the ground, and the ladder fell on my arm, causing me terrible pain. My father took me and drove a very long distance to get to the nearest doctor. My arm was broken, and the doctor plastered it. When we got to the cabin, my parents decided we should cancel that vacation and leave this place in the morning. My sister asked us to take a walk to the river for a bit, since it was our last night here. Indeed, we went out and stood on the river bank, and silence overcame all of us. I noticed a look of fear on my father's face as he was looking at the other side of the river. He could see a lady standing on the other side. When I looked, I saw her too. What terrified me was that her face was featureless. I closed my eyes, opened them again, and found her gone. The third night passed, and in the morning we boarded the first plane and took off for our country. 2 years later, I told the whole story to my father's friend, the cabin owner. I explained to him what happened to us there and everything we saw. A look of sadness and pity appeared in his eyes. Then he started telling me there was a woman who lived in this cabin with her husband and 4 children. She was suffering from depression and many mental illnesses because of her husband's mistreatment of her. She attempted suicide several times by drowning herself in the bathtub, slaying herself with a kitchen knife, or setting herself on fire in the fireplace. And every time she tried, her husband stopped her and locked her in the upper floor room. Until the day she completely lost her mind and murdered her husband. Then she threw his body into the river. Finally, she put a lot of boxes on the balcony, climbed on them, and hanged herself. I asked him, "How did you know all that?" Who told him this story? But he said no one told him that. Rather, he saw it himself. This lady was his mother.
Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and become a member of the Midnight Screams family. Also, don't forget to share and like with your family and friends. Oh yes, and if you have a horror story or other terrifying experience, you can send it to subscribersstories2023@gmail.com. It can also be found in the description below. Wait for us every Sunday and Wednesday with a new animated story. Be sure to activate the bell button to receive all the updates. We love you so much, and we hope you have pleasant nightmares.